Hello, I'm Adam Wren,
And I'm Myah Ward. It's Friday, July 25th.
and this is the Playbook Podcast. And here are the topics driving the day. First up, President Donald Trump is getting out of Dodge today. Among the continuous drip revelations and the Epstein storyline, Trump is headed to Scotland. Myah, you're going to be on the trip. Talk to me about what's on deck for the president.
Yeah, so Trump lands in Scotland today for a 5-day trip. It'll be some golfing, there's some meetings. I will just note on the plane, notably missing from the press pool this week is the Wall Street Journal, which was removed by the White House after its reporting on Trump and Epstein. So, even thousands of miles away, there are still going to be plenty of reminders of the story that he cannot get away from.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit about the itinerary. He's going to be in Turnberry and Aberdeen. How many days of this? When will he get back?
So today is a travel day, but as you know, with Donald Trump, that does not mean that there will not be news. That is one thing about this president. He is very accessible. Oftentimes he'll chat on the tarmac or come back on the plane during a long trip like this. And so you can expect there are going to be lots of questions about Epstein and trade and all of the key topics from this week. And so we'll have the travel day today. We should expect a couple of golf days. He will also have a visit with the UK Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, and he'll be opening another course in Scotland as well that will be dedicated to his mother, who was born there.
So this is somewhat of a business trip for his own personal business as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, the president has had ties to Scotland for years, both family ties, and he made that first trip in 2006 to go to Scotland and express his interest in building these courses. So he's visited several times over the course of the last couple of decades. I think what will be really interesting is we're already seeing some chatter about protest activity. Police are preparing for that. It's unclear. We were talking about the Epstein stuff earlier. How much is that story actually breaking through thousands of miles away? We're already seeing some signs that protesters might use this to needle Trump. There was a sign placed outside of his course in Aberdeen that mentioned Epstein Island. In London, there was a picture of Trump and Epstein. So we'll have to see what it looks like on the ground there, but there are definitely already signs that that's going to be something that the protesters use.
As he returns, he's going to be met by the Epstein storyline again. He doesn't get much distance from it. He does physically, not much psychologically. It seems like most of his attention is going to be focused here domestically, even when he's gone. On Thursday night, we saw him release sort of a bouquet of endorsements for a number of Republican candidates ahead of the midterms up and down the ballot. People like Mike Rogers, who's running in Michigan, people like Michael Whatley in North Carolina, his departing RNC chair. I think that the midterms are really looming large for Trump. The ghosts of 2018, when he lost about 40 seats in the House, gained 2 seats in the Senate, he's really thinking about that. He wants to have an effective final 2 years in the White House to really make his legacy. Myah, what are you hearing generally about how the White House is thinking about the midterms from your White House sources?
I was actually just talking with a person close to the White House not too long ago about this, and something that struck me, the source said this is not the same as his first term when there wasn't as much of a fixation on this. And I think that speaks to why we are already seeing so much from Trump on this and action from the White House. Like, they are on top of this, and the president is heavily invested. And the source was saying there wasn't the same intensity last go around about holding on to power in Congress. Of course they cared, but this time Trump and his allies, they see a lot at stake, especially when it comes to the president's agenda. They saw how much was undone last time when Biden came into office. They want the president's work to last well beyond these 4 years. And this speaks to some of my reporting on the immigration front. EOs alone, that's not lasting policy. That takes Congress and Republicans holding on to power. The other thing that this person was saying, they don't want to be dealing with investigations and impeachment threats that we saw from the first term. They believe that if Democrats gain power in Congress, that is something that they would see again.
I think it's fascinating here. I was talking to Tony Fabrizio, the president's pollster, as well as Chris LaCivita, his former presidential campaign manager. Both of them are taking outsized roles during the midterms, managing any number of campaigns up and down the ballot. Fabrizio, mostly Senate and Gov. Chris LaCivita is doing some super PACs, some Senate races. And Myah, I was sort of struck by what Fabrizio told me, which was in the 2018 midterms, essentially Trump outsourced the midterms to the party committees, to the RNC, to the NRSC. And so he's outsourced the campaign back then. Now he's really keeping it in-house, the White House political operation with Deputy Chief of Staff James Blair, Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, and he's really tightly managing this up and down the ballot. You covered the Democrats and President Biden's White House. How does that differ from the way that they approached the midterms?
There are definitely some similarities here and constant communication between the folks that they tap to work on this outside of the White House. And we're seeing that with the Trump operation. What strikes me about what you just said is it's just another sign of how this White House is operating and how different it is from that first term. We've seen so many examples, whether it's on personnel and installing loyalists in the White House or on policy and finding ways to push things through in the way that they weren't the first time. Like they're drawing on so many lessons from Trump's first term. And I think we're seeing that again with how they've set up this midterms operation and the president himself really wanting to be heavily involved here.
That's just such a really smart observation. And it's really of a piece and the big story of Trump 2.0, which is that he seems to have learned a lot, whether it's about the midterms, whether it's about staffing his administration, Senate confirmation battles, when to part ways with a cabinet official and when not to. It does seem like he and his advisors have learned a lot from that. Well, when President Trump, of course, comes home, the Epstein story, as we said, is still going to be roiling. And there's a steady stream of news even today coming out about Epstein. In Cleveland, Ohio, the Democratic Mayors Association is going to be gathering for one of their meetings, and they're going to be hearing from 2028 Democratic hopefuls like Congressman Ro Khanna of California and also Governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear. We have an exclusive look ahead at Representative Khanna's remarks. And of course, he went to Ohio earlier this year to frame the son of Ohio, J.D. Vance, the potential presidential candidate in 2028. And he framed him intellectually, criticized him back then. And he's going to be doing the same thing later today in Cleveland. We have a copy of his remarks, and he's going to bring up Jeffrey Epstein. He's going to ask J.D. Vance whose side he's on, whether he's on the side of Epstein or whether he's on the side of transparency and children and parents across the country who have been harmed by Jeffrey Epstein's deeds. Myah, what do you make on the White House being able to turn the page? It's been the story of the last month. They've really struggled from July 6th till now to pivot beyond this storyline.
I think that's what's so significant here. We've had a lot of these stories, right? Big explosive things happen over the last 6 months, but Trump, what he is so good at is getting to that next thing. I believe it was Steve Bannon who coined this term that this administration, the first 100 days, it was going to be days of thunder. And I mean, that's what we saw. You know, it was action after action. And every week, there were like 5 different stories that we could be chasing. This one is different for the White House. We're seeing pressure from the president's allies. We are seeing Democrats latch onto the storyline. And it's hard to see it fading anytime soon. And as Dasha has reported and others in our newsroom, this White House is frustrated with that, and they want to talk about anything else. And I expect that that is what we're going to see the president try to do on this trip, is turn attention to his meeting with Keir Starmer or talk about his golf courses, you know, whatever he thinks that he can get attention on in that moment. We saw that all week from his trip to the Fed and everything else that he did. And no matter what he does, he can't seem to shake this one.
Well, we'll be watching the trip as it unfolds over the weekend, and we will do so with a little bit of jealousy of you and your trip there. So safe travels.
Thanks so much.
As always, we try to end the show with something a little bit different, just like we do our newsletter with our Talk of the Town section. And today we are talking about Hulk Hogan, the famous wrestler who passed away yesterday at 71. Significant person in our politics over the last couple of decades. Myah was famously involved in the lawsuit against Gawker and Peter Thiel. And then again, we saw him at the Republican National Convention last summer giving a speech on behalf of President Trump. Andy Sarabian, who is a close advisor to Donald Trump Jr. and to J.D. Vance, posted a fun ex post of him standing by him and of him practicing his speech. Myah, were you a professional wrestling fan at all? And what sort of legacy do you think Hulk Hogan left?
Yeah, I mean, I personally am not, but my family definitely is a character that I remember growing up. And I saw something funny from Tom Holman today, who talked about his love of Hulk Hogan and what an icon he was, and actually mentioned that his dog, Italian Mastiff, is Hulk Homan.
That's pretty funny. Pretty good name. And that's all for today's show. Myah, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
But we have much more news and analysis in today's Playbook newsletter, which you can find at politico.com/playbook. We'll be back next week. Have a great Friday.